Since the dawn of time, animals have served humans as not only a source of companionship, but as a nutritional resource. However, time is an element that yields uninterpretable results, as we can now see a society form where animals are no longer being treated with the same type of respect and care they deserve. An example being the practice of animal experimentation. Every day, scientific experiments occur where an innocent animal is placed in harm's way in hopes of achieving new drugs to combat ever-growing fatal diseases. However, through critical analysis, one can see that the advantages of such a procedure are unjustifiable, as the act itself is not only cruel and inhumane and can yield very minimal results, but there have been proven studies showing that there are alternatives to the practice that can attain similar, if not better, results. In 2009, an undercover laboratory investigation displayed shocking images of chimpanzees uncontrollably spinning around in their cages, ripping open wounds with their teeth, mutilating themselves, and pulling out their own hair, all because of the continuous psychological distress they were forced to endure. The term for this series of events is stress-induced psychosis, thus demonstrating how laboratories are literally driving these beloved animals insane. Upon seeing footage of chimpanzees from this same investigation, famed primatologist Dr. Jane Goodall stated, "In no lab I have visited have I seen so many chimpanzees exhibit such intense fear. The screaming I heard when chimpanzees were being forced to move toward the dreaded needle in their squeezed cages was for me absolutely horrifying." This case is especially traumatizing as chimpanzees are widely known to be one of the closest animals, biologically speaking, to humans. So therefore, their pain intake would be relatively close to ours, making one think what it would be like if the tables were turned and we were to experience the same physical and mental trauma these chimpanzees feel. Furthermore, this is not only one documented account of what laboratory animals have to cope with every day, and for most, their entire lives. What is said for the undocumented animals that go unnoticed in the statistics every year? An estimated 115 million animals worldwide are used in laboratory experiments every year. However, the precise number is unknown as only a small proportion of countries collect and publish data regarding animals' use for testing and research. To put it into perspective, in the United States, up to 90% of the animals used in laboratories are excluded from the official statistics, meaning the figures published by the U.S. Department of Agriculture are no doubt a substantial understatement. For all of the undocumented and documented caged animals living a monotonous life full of nothing but pain and fear, one can finally begin to understand and even sympathize with these animals as far as the constant strain put on their sanity through pain and torture. Moreover, some say that animal experimentation has been proven to work, thus should remain a common practice in the scientific research community. However, it has been notably successful through medicines like penicillin and treatments to disease like breast cancer. The National Institutes of Health had noticed that 95% of all drugs that are shown to be safe and effective in animal tests fail in human trials because they don't work or are dangerous. And of the small percentage of drugs approved for human use, half end up being relabeled because of the side effects that were not identified in tests on animals. This begs the question, how many deaths of innocent animals capable of feeling pain are worth the value of a possible treatment of cure to a life-threatening disease? Looking through a more macro lens, one can very clearly see that for the vast amount of deaths of laboratory animals, the results yielded are not sufficient to the justification of the cruel acts portrayed on experimental animals. Finally, a common misconception is that we live in a world where there is no other choice to animal experimentation and that it occurs out of necessity, when in reality, alternatives do exist. In 2008, the EPA and the NIH's National Toxicity Program and Chemical Genomics Center signed a memorandum of understanding to begin developing new methods of toxicity testing that involve the use of lab-grown human cells instead of animals. After the EPA began evaluating 300 chemicals using the new methods, they found that it allows for thousands of chemicals to be tested at once. According to former NIH Director Elias Zerhouni, it won't mean that animal testing will disappear overnight, but it signals the beginning of the end. This new wave of cell testing is a practice that should be utilized at every research facility, and it is much more precise considering it uses grown human cells for treatments for human diseases. Animal cells have the possibility of misleading researchers and causing for a drug to be approved for human use when that specific drug is not necessarily as safe as they might think. For example, during the 1920s and the 1930s, studies on monkeys led to gross misconceptions that delayed the fight against polio, an infectious viral disease that can cause temporary or permanent paralysis. Research with human cell structures in 1949 first showed that the virus could be cultivated on non-neural tissues taken from the intestine and limbs. Yet, in the early 1950s, cell cultures from monkeys rather than humans were used for vaccine production. As a result, millions of people were exposed to potentially harmful monkey viruses. This was one of the first times that animal testing had failed humans in their quest for the advancement of cures, and is a prime example as to the possible side effects testing on animals can yield. We must seize this new opportunity to rid ourselves of animal testing, as it is not only beneficial to humans, but to animals living lives full of desperation and pain. Every year, millions of animals are subject to extensive, painful procedures to benefit man's existence on this world. When these occurrences no longer need to continue, as there are alternative methods that have been proven to be superior to animal testing, animals are in need of our joint efforts to stop these acts of cruelty, for as a minority, nothing is achievable. Ultimately, the change sought is a change that will be achieved gradually rather than immediately. However, every inch of support helps in a field dominated by animal experimentation. So efforts should not be taken lightly and should be moreover celebrated to endorse the idea that animal experimentation is a practice that should no longer. Thank you. Thank you for listening, and good night.